Abraham Maslow devoted his life to studying self-actualization and trying to understand the farther reaches of human nature, but even handsome Abe did not actualize alone. If you study his biography, you'll realize that little Abe was a bit of an awkward and strange child, and he didn't really come into his power until he started to form close friendships and close relationships, which is exactly the theme of this video. We're going to try and explore this idea of, can you become your true self without friends or without close connections, real friends, real connections, and then also this idea of, do you need to belong in a group or a tribe or a community to become a self-actualizing individual? It's a fascinating question, and I'll give you my answer up front. I think you need friends. You might not need a tribe, you might not need a community, you might not need a society and a culture that you truly resonate with, but you need a few close friends, and most people need at least one significant romantic relationship, especially if their path of self-actualization involves becoming a mother, a father, or raising a family. You cannot have a child alone. Therefore, you cannot self-actualize as a mother or a father, as a grandparent, or even as a brother or sister without the family structure. There's so many forms of the conversation for us to go into, but let's frame it with today's wonderful question, which I'm going to bring up on the screen from someone who asked me for my thoughts articulated on self-preservation versus self-actualization in the context of group belonging, and then a little bit further down, this idea that if you are truly a self-actualizing individual, sometimes you give up some of the more nuanced expressions of your own being in the interest of self-preservation. Fantastic question. You can pause and read it if you want to. I'm going to try and focus on the essential idea that, as you've probably experienced when you're going into your self-actualizing era, whether that be young man or young woman going into early adulthood, or whether that be a transition of midlife, or maybe something in your later age, you tend to lose aspects of your own unique identity when you enter into group settings. It's not always dramatic. You don't necessarily become a shell of yourself, but you'll start to censor some of your opinions. Maybe you diminish your energy in one way or another, or you artificially exaggerate your character traits. You don't truly behave like yourself. So what's happening here? Where do we find this balance between self-preservation and self-actualization? And how can you identify fundamentally if the groups, tribes, communities, and cultures that you find yourself a part of are truly in your best interest and the interest of everyone else that you're interacting with? What I think we need to do is look at the being values as articulated in this 50-year-old book about actualization theory, or humanistic psychology overall. About halfway through the book, we have a list of the 14 being values, and these are essentially the values that self-actualizers live by, rather than the deficiency values or the survival-based values that we need at the bottom of the classic Maslow's pyramid. We're looking for the values, the morals, and the ethics at the very peak of that pyramid structure, and this is what Maslow has found after decades of research. There are 14 of them with many different synonyms, but I'm going to read them out, and then we can compare it against your different community affiliations and your close friendships, your romantic relationships, and try and find out if you're truly in the self-actualizing situation. So, the 14 values. Number 1, truth. Are your relationships truthful? Interesting way of framing it. Just this kind of framing of, is it a truthful relationship? Am I being truthful in this relationship or this community? And then the same principle throughout. So number 2, goodness. Is this relationship bringing out the goodness of my heart, the goodness of my soul, the goodness of my intellect, my creativity? You get the idea. Number 3, beauty. Number 4, wholeness. Number 5, aliveness. Number 6, uniqueness. Then perfection, necessity, completion, justice, order, simplicity, richness, effortlessness, playfulness, and self-sufficiency. Hopefully this comes up on the camera, that there are many synonyms for each of those individual 14 being values. And what you need to see, and this is a pattern that I found thankfully articulated in Maslow on Management, which is another collection of essays, there's this wonderful extract about how the being values interact with each other. So just a bit of theory to frame it out. Maslow says, quote, each B value, if it is fully defined to its limits, turns out to be defined in terms of each and all of the other being values. Again, being a self-actualization kind of catchphrase. So it's a self-actualizing value. That's what we're talking about here. Continuing the quote, that is to say, when I tried to define truth and honesty, totality, and ultimately I went on as far to find as blah, 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 blah. I'm losing the quote. Point is, there's a long quote here, and he says, if you take all of these being values and you actually cross-connect them, self-actualizing in my language, you get the idea. There's 14 values, you've got all of the top of the pyramid. It is up to you to decide if those values match against your personal relationships. Trying to do too much in one video because I'm trying to keep this as short and concise as possible, and ultimately it's very difficult to truly measure out if your relationships and your belonging in a group is a truly self-actualizing move, because life is messy. There are certain aspects of your close relationships which are primarily motivated by survival, and other aspects of your relationships, maybe even the same relationship, the same romantic partner, the same community group, where you have different levels of your being met or being challenged in terms of how self-actualizing, how authentic, how survival and scarcity based is this, and you won't ever have a truly self-actualizing connection, which may sound confronting and almost pessimistic. I don't believe that even the most conscious connection, the conscious relationship, let's say, the true marriage, the most beautiful family, the idyllic golden shadow projection of what love could be, is ever truly self-actualization alone, because you have to remember that the pyramid rests on the base of self-preservation and survival. And if you're a man or a woman who wants to sleep in bed at night with your partner for a feeling of being safe and the demons of the world are keeping away from you, or there's a feeling of being able to look after each other when you're sick, self-preservation needs are nested within the higher needs of self-actualization, and it's up to you to accept that all needs need to be expressed at all levels in the truly close connections to be a self-actualizing individual in a self-actualizing relationship or community. You can't skip out any stage in that process. The being values, again, to bring a few of them out, just now going back into the book, I truly recommend you pick up a copy of The Farther Reaches of Human Nature and read it for yourself. There's so much that I'm going to hopefully explore in upcoming videos on self-actualization. I'm going to shift the channel towards more of these kinds of ideas because I think they're fascinating, and I have so much that I want to say. I'm trying to fit it in one video. It's just impossible. But if we look at the idea of uniqueness, and we look at the idea of justice or richness, and then all the different synonyms of complexity, of fairness, of justice, and just so much richness in those higher bands of human consciousness, of course you're not going to experience that every single day in every single group that you belong in. There will be some sacrifice. You won't be able to be in a relationship with your partner all 7 days of the week and be living for the self-actualization needs alone. You will have basic needs and basic interactions and basic conflicts and very much the lower human bands of consciousness which are present in your relationship throughout the relationship. And it's the same for a community. If we go back to this idea of do we need to have true friends or real friends to become our true self, I once again want to emphasize I don't think it's possible. Abraham Maslow, the founder of humanistic psychology, or one of the main founders of humanistic psychology, didn't become his true self until he had a best friend, until he had a close romantic relationship, and he went off to university to be embedded in a community of different intellectually oriented scholars and academics, and he finally went into his true personality because he had the option and the opportunity to express that personality in this series of interchangeable and exchangeable interactions with this person over here and that person over there and this person over here to get many perspectives on who he was. And it's true for you and me. I'm almost holding Abe up as a pedestal. I could probably take the book here and then him and I could hang out and have a conversation. It's quite a good front cover, actually, because it gives you that feeling that I could have a conversation with him. I'm not quite going to animate him because that would be the brink of insanity. Read this book for yourself. Learn about Abraham Maslow, and also accept that in your own life, you will need other people. You can't do it alone. You might have a season of your life, maybe even an extended season of multiple years, where you're going into the cave and you're spending very little time with other people. But to become a mother, a father, to raise a family, to have an impact on a community, you need to be connected with others. And that's why I'll say rather definitively, you cannot self-actualize in isolation. You can have a period of isolation which leads to a breakthrough of self-actualization at a certain band of consciousness, in a certain lane of intelligence, in a certain line of expression, but the overall thrust of your life is connection. And if you're not feeling the connections that you need, maybe it's a bit more isolation that's required, maybe it's some more outward socialization, but it's likely that the full path of your potential will be discovered and will be repeatedly reinforced by healthy self-actualizing relationships with other self-actualizing individuals or self-actualizing communities. Once again, I recommend that you read this book for yourself. I recommend that immediately you go and pick up a copy of The Father Reaches of Human Nature, and I recommend that if you want a series of essays, you pick up Maslow on Management. And I apologize I didn't go into this video with as much detail as I probably would have wanted to, but if I truly wanted to break this down in a full video essay, I'd probably need about 10 hours to plan things out. So I'm just going to leave this as a short little moment in your week, and more videos will come on this topic. You can leave a comment down in the comment section if you want self-actualization oriented specifics on the being values and peak potential. I would love to answer them. It's my favorite place to go. I'll see you in the next video. So there.